There.
Yeah, we're recording and we are goals to add people as they.
Okay, fantastic. All right, well, let's.
Yes.
Let's go ahead and while they're still working on this, formally begin our Harrisville Planning Commission work session. January 11th, 2023. Hard to believe. Looks like we have a presentation by Kevin and Dugan from Blalock and Associate. I'm looking forward to this, and we'd like to welcome the mayor and all of our guests tonight. Thank you for coming and thank you for your interest in doing it. I appreciate that. And so, if you're ready, Kevin and Dugan, we'll just turn the time over to both of you to take us forward.
Yeah, technology.
Putting our minds together.
There's so many like different. I always forget if I'm Zoom or Team or Google Meet or whatever. So, thanks for your time today. We've been working with the city of Harrisville for several months now on the public works facility complex. As you all know, 750 West, kind of between 750 West and 89, Highway 89, that city-owned parcel. So, we know there's still some things going on with the parcel in terms of like finishing up the acquisition of the connection to 89. But our focus is on the west side of the site, the public works campus. So, again, I'm Kevin Blalock with Blalock Partners. My associate, Brandon, Blalock and Partners. We've been engaged by the city to be your architect for this project. And we are actually happy to kind of partner with Circ Construction, a couple gentlemen, Rich and Steve from Circ. I say partner again because we've worked with them on 3 or 4 projects in addition to this one, and they bring a lot of value, construction knowledge. Their formal title is construction manager / general contractor.
Important either way.
Yeah. So they're here for any questions related to their scope. And we're super informal, so feel free to ask questions as we go along. A lot of people, I think, have a preconception about a public works facility that's going to look sort of like a warehouse or a shop building. So we wanted to kind of start with letting you know what we're not designing. This is not a big warehouse or airplane hangar. We've got something kind of completely different in mind. So, we went through an interview process with Jennie, Mayor, Justin, and Matt, who's the project manager for the city. And we were delighted to be selected as the architect. We shared some of our work as part of that process. Our firm does about 85% of our work is civic focused, public dollars, public buildings. So just about anything outside of K through 12 and higher ed, kind of in our wheelhouse. So, some examples of our work and how this relates maybe more to your project. We kind of approach this as a civic building, whereas more than a warehouse. We like to think of these having a 50-year lifespan, so that kind of speaks to a quality level that we're trying to achieve. The functional efficiency is kind of paramount. I mean, first and foremost, it has to function for the city, for the user. Obviously, we want and need it to be low maintenance, both inside and out. And because so many cities like Harrisville are growing sort of exponentially, especially in the last 5 years, this adaptability and flexibility is really paramount when we start planning and thinking about how things come together. Authenticity, making sure we have a project that's authentic to Harrisville. So we're not going to take one of our other projects that's kind of a cookie cutter and drop it on your site and say, here you go. And then some other kind of nuances, recognizing this is phase one of a greater civic campus, which is pretty exciting, but also comes with some responsibility. And then because of the siting, the positioning of the building or this particular site, it really has 4 public faces. It's going to be viewed and engaged by the public on all 4 sides. That has some design implications. And then obviously we want to be responsible with public funding with all of our projects. So we want to make sure that we're aligning with the available budget. Okay. So these are kind of like our
Jenny, you want me to get that?
Please, that's Matt.
they're kind of our marching orders, like a kind of a hierarchy for some decision making as well.
Thank you for sharing that.
But and this was our leaping off point. The city and Jones Associates had done a number of weeks of work, if not months of work, kind of getting to this point. And it was a lot of really useful information, so we didn't really have to start from ground zero. Obviously, we looked at this with kind of through sort of a different lens, and offered up some suggestions for capitalizing on some other opportunities, right? So with this as a starting point, we kind of jumped in, and this is more or less a diagram of where we are today. Of course, the city complex is again still to the east. We're really focused on that west side, like I mentioned, the public works complex. And what we started to explore is the opportunity for the public works to expand in the future to the north. So this kind of initial phase would allow for green space or a buffer between property owners. So we're kind of embracing the idea of building a little bit less asphalt, a little bit less concrete, at least with this first phase, knowing that the public works could grow and expand to the north, whether that's an additional structure or supplemental parking or lay down yard, whatever it might be. And similarly, if we look at how this might engage with the civic campus, kind of as a bigger picture, there then creates the opportunity for more green space up to the north that might eventually become community recreation or community event space. Just some early ideas that we were bouncing across the committee's bow. And with our process, we were always presenting options, and then as sort of a greater group of architect, engineers, and the clients, just objectively evaluating, and here's the pros and cons of each option. So we created probably a couple dozen site studies to date that we've shared with the group, and over 30 floor plan options. It's kind of specific to the shop and the administration building. And again, our meeting process is to kind of share 4 or 5 options, and then we just sort of throw darts at it and say, this is what's working well with option A, this is what's working well with option D. And then we come back to the next meeting with sort of a combination of those options and kind of sort of a constant test with the group. Do we have to let somebody else in?
I don't know what that was.
Yeah. All right, so again, this is just kind of big picture. You know, north is up, 750 west is to the left, Highway 89. You know your property, right? And then you just sort of go ahead, you just sort of zooming in a little bit tighter. This is kind of a little bit more site development, still very conceptual at this stage. But this was today's meeting, was the first time that we introduced, like, and we're suggesting some planting elements. We're a little bit more realistic with our parking configuration and how people will engage with and access the building, and trying to get all of the building components in there as well.
Is that employee parking over by the fuel and public parking on the admin side?
Exactly, yeah. So there is some separation and some security. We've got kind of a vehicle security gate that the employees would go through. And then obviously the public parking is open, accessible. There's a well, an existing well that we're planning on capping. It's kind of that bullseye there in the targets in the parking lot. So we're designing around that instead of trying to build over the top of it. So again, just sort of a reminder, we kind of always like to go back to our criteria for decision making. Everything from the 50-year lifespan all the way down to making sure that we're aligning with the available budget. Not that those are in any particular order, but it's just sort of a good reminder.
So when you say you're trying to take care of the water or the well, the top of the well, right there, how does it look now? What does it look like now?
It's capped right now, right?
Currently, it's just a pipe with a cap on the top,
Oh, okay.
but what we need to do is hire a well company to come in, pump concrete down and seal it off at the well head. That way water cannot come up way down.
Okay.
So from a floor plan perspective, it's lovely. I agree. Just from a floor plan perspective, the primary building components, from top to bottom, there's a sand and salt storage facility at the north end. Directly adjacent to that is a single lane truck wash that's kind of a pull through. There's a 4-bay pull through shop facility that will also have kind of a small office for some workstations, some parts storage, and then we kind of call it fluid containment area. So from that fluid containment room, they're distributing hydraulic fluid, power steering fluid, oils, lubricants, and so forth. And then the admin building sort of anchors the south end, and that's obviously the most public component. That's the piece that the public would engage with directly. So we've designed that right now as a 2-story structure, with the ground floor being fully complete and fully occupied. And the second story would be something that the city could grow into over time. So that goes back to ensuring there's some flexibility, some adaptability, and obviously there's some substantial cost benefits to kind of building that out as a shell space right now, rather than trying to come back and build an entire second floor later on. Dougie, do you want to talk about kind of how we arrived at sizes and building components?
Yeah, so we've done a number of public works facilities for cities large and small. Before we start to even get to these floor plans, this level, we really start to just break it up into pieces and to help understand how many offices, how many bays, and all of that information is driven by what Justin and his group currently has, as well as we're looking at your current population and your estimated growth and how that relates to Justin's estimated growth as far as like number of employees, number of vehicles, the type of vehicles that he's going to have in the future, and what the sizes of those vehicles would be and how they need to be repaired and whatnot. And getting all that information out of Justin and pulling sort of projected population data really starts to drive how many offices, how many bays, and sizes of conference rooms and break rooms and stuff like that, as well as we go through an exercise, even on the salt storage structure of, okay, you know, how much material can Justin's group get? How much material are they using and on an average snowstorm, which lately is a whole lot. And so that really is an equation of this is how much material they need, this is how much material that space would occupy, and that's what starts to drive the size of those different spaces. We're always taking into account that snow plows are getting bigger and bigger, and they're getting more and more advanced. And we already know that. And so even Even the sectional door sizes that we're specifying right now are considerably wider than typical, because we know those snow plows are going to become more advanced, they're gonna become wider, they're gonna have balloons on the side for plowing, and we wanna make sure that Justin can get those vehicles in and out of maintenance facility, not banging into a wall and causing damage.
So we're gonna have at least one small one for the cul-de-sacs, or isn't that couple times?
Yeah.
For sure, for sure.
On your bays there, they pull through or they just,
They are pulled through, so we've got 16-foot wide sectional doors on this side and this side. Really try to minimize any sort of situation where Justin's group would have to back into a bay. That's why even our truck wash is a pull through. You can enter through here, exit through there. Trying to.
how do they access their top of their truck?
In the truck wash.
Mhm.
So you can see here, we have a platform. That's a set of stairs that goes up to a platform along here. And we also even put a little, water cannon, if you will. So Justin's group can even start to lift the end dump and be able to spray out that bit.
Yeah, because as technology safe as these sanders are, they leave a lot in the bed of that truck.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely right.
yeah.
So if you don't take the time to maintenance that piece of equipment and wash that stuff out, you have problems.
Absolutely.
And being able to do that properly adds to the longevity of those vehicles. And with that understanding of a lot of salt is coming out of those vehicles, we take that into consideration of designing our truck wash. We advocate for what we call a rust-free truck wash. So it's not a metal stud framed building. It's concrete or CMU. We're putting a coating on the walls, and then, we've got an oxycoated rebar. Even the platform itself is unique because it's 100% like fiberglass. Even the structural shapes are fiberglass. And the sectional doors are polycarbonate. So there's not a way for rust to occur. Again, we're looking to achieve that 50-year lifespan for the building by designing it correctly today.
And that's a lot of information about a truck wash. You're super well informed on large vehicles, so. I just wanted to maybe bring you up to speed on part of our process. We walked with Justin, met his staff, walked through his facility. Said to ourselves, how have you been here this long, right? Because there are some real issues and challenges over there. Found out that the city's actually sold that property and with the plan to move here. So there is a timeline that we're trying to hit. So part of our process, understanding what they're working with currently, evaluating their needs. Then we went on a series of field trips. We went to a few different public works facilities up and down the Wasatch Front to kind of, again, throw some darts, like, Justin, what do you think about this in terms of functionality? Is that something that would work for the way you guys do your day-to-day operations? So we took them to some of our projects and we took them to some of projects that weren't ours.
And Justin's been incredibly helpful in that process because we're not experts on how they work. Justin and his guys are. So we rely heavily on pulling information out of him and showing him different options of how those tasks can be completed. And he's able to give us kind of the feedback on, yes, this works. No, this doesn't work. Yes, I like this. Let's do this. And the sort of feedback that we've gotten out of Justin has been crucial in where we are at today.
Yeah, so part of our design process is we don't come in with a predetermined idea of what the building should look like or what it should be made out of. Again, we use some of those decision-making criteria that we referenced earlier, and we show kind of a host of material options. And these are some thumbnail images of the materials for the exterior cladding that the executive committee was kind of most drawn to. So right now we're exploring some slate cladding. and a few different types of metal on the building. And even some areas of wood, for some added warmth, whether that is real wood or kind of a faux wood that's, actually an extruded metal product. So again, these are, 50 to 100-year building products, low maintenance, and really surprisingly cost effective. So again, we started with the city several months ago, and just in the past couple months, we brought CERC on board as the CMGC. And CERC has been just fantastic in helping us assign some costs to like what is really very preliminary or sort of conceptual building. But we know that we need the sizes that we're showing. We know that we need the sort of the functionality. So they've diligently sort of embraced the project and identified the price tag or the cost per component that helps kind of allow us and the executive committee to start to prioritize the development of the property. So right now, if you were to add all of those things up, we're a little bit out of alignment with the dollars that we have. So right now we're going through this sort of reconciliation process where we're trying to grab the low-hanging fruit, as Steve says, to make sure that we can still achieve the function, the end result that we need, and just marry up to the dollars that we have.
And this sort of real level, high level, or highly detailed amount of cost information that CERC is able to give us this incredibly early in the process is extremely helpful in helping us start to determine what really starts to make sense moving forward. And so that ultimately the project is on budget. None of this is like fully designed. We are still purely just lines on paper. And so we still have great level of adaptability to start to reconcile that.
In full disclosure, we have a very large site, so it's a pretty big chunk of money. We've got 1.3, a little bit more than that, just in site, infrastructure, utilities, asphalt, landscaping, and so forth. And if anybody's been following construction costs for the last couple of years, things are crazy right now. So in full disclosure, we're probably looking at the storage shop and the fueling station probably as a phase 2 item to really take a big chunk of dollars in order to help kind of balance the budget where we are right now. So I think that's probably what we're looking at is the storage shop. And the fuel island is a phase 2, which is just another way of saying that the salt and sand storage, the shop, the admin building, the truck wash are the largest priority for Harrisville City right now.
So the landscaping would be included in phase 1?
Correct, yeah. And this is kind of the first time we shared a little bit more site development study with the group. We were really looking at kind of a row of trees along 750 West to help screen the building a little bit. It's obviously a pretty large structure, but I think we've been pretty sensitive at its development, its massing. And we obviously want to make sure that people are aware of the front door and have some kind of softness at that public entrance, because that will be a public entrance to the civic campus as well. So we do have sort of a 3-dimensional model that we can kind of move around, and you guys can see it on that other screen. I think.
Yes. I tried to use that with this stuff. I was like, I don't know what
Okay.
So are we doing anything with landscaping on the north side between the north house and this property?
I think right now we would probably just leave that as is and just kind of create a hard asphalt edge for the driveway for the kind of secondary entrance for public works.
but no landscaping is planned.
So we've pulled the site down significantly from that north point.
Right.
We're sitting more on the south end of the initial site. The initial plan was to construct the road at that north property line boundary, but as you can see, we've pulled that.
Yeah.
We've pulled that down, and as part of the site improvements, that'll be for future expansion.
Yeah, versus, putting in some irrigation and controls that would probably gonna have to be removed in the future.
Okay, I'm just curious as to why we're not doing any landscaping there.
If you plant 7 trees, you have to rip them up when you want to build a building there.
All right, not unless you put it along the fence area.
Hey, Kevin and Dugan, is it about 100 feet or so? It looks like from that next property line to the north,
Correct.
or even a little bit further.
For 100-ish.
Okay, so there will be a pretty significant buffer between that property and what's going in right now.
155 if you want to get a little bit closer.
All right, I like that. Yep.
So, Matt, if anybody else is on, you won't be able to see that screen, right?
Right.
But we're basically, Matt, kind of zooming around our 3-dimensional model to give the committee and the public a kind of a more better picture, I guess, of our building development on the exterior.
Yeah, so if you're able to see that screen. So again, this is kind of matching that site plan that you were seeing before, so north is out. Yep. So we've got. This is the shop here, this is the admin building, truck wash is kind of at the end. And then that's kind of been our primary focus. But we can kind of start to move down sort of eye level. We've got a couple different options to show you guys, and similarly to our floor plan and site plan options, we've been showing the executive committee multiple different massing studies of what the project would start to look like. And as of today, this is kind of where we currently are. I'm going to go ahead and turn off kind of the trees so you start to get a little bit more of the view. And we'll keep moving around the building. This is an elevation that
Thank you.
Justin, again, on his feedback was very kind of crucial on informing the decision that where we are today. So sorry, I'm trying to get my mouse cursor. There we go. Yeah, there we go. So we had shown a number of different massing options, and Justin had this idea. Let's take this one and let's rotate it, and really in doing that, that's what started to become kind of this composition that you're seeing right now of this almost kind of mountain-esque sort of elevation. And really the 2 buildings, although they are separate, they have 2 different functions, but they are for one group. And so they do start to begin to relate to each other with their kind of their massing and their roof lines. We can keep kind of zooming around.
We certainly don't have all the windows and doors kind of worked out yet. You're missing the exit door on the truck wash in this view. This is the open sand and salt storage. It needs to be covered, obviously to protect that. But this is, pretty good indication of the direction that we're headed with everybody's blessing.
And move around to this kind of this other side.
How tall of trees are we planting relative to the size of that building?
So on day one, they'll be very
We're typically specifying a 2-inch caliper,
yeah,
just
right.
to start. And we can, we can talk through different species and if we're adding some evergreen versus deciduous, so that we've kind of got year-round life and screening and protection. And of course, Christmas light opportunities.
Yeah, we're typically when we're showing trees like we are now, I mean, that's full growth. We're not buying full growth trees. Like 10 years, yeah. We're just trying to start to help them understand what the project will and start to. And today was really kind of the first time that we started showing trees on a site and that sort of thing. So we've already got some feedback from them that, this will certainly still continue to evolve and.
Justin says, I just want to maintain roads. I don't want to maintain lawn and landscape. We said,
Well, not my wish, is what I said.
That was part of your job.
No,
You just put the trees in the public, and Parks and Rec department. And you do a little park.
it's all negotiation.
So are all those smaller trees, is that like a courtyard? Is it?
Yeah,
Like a cement, just with a rounded area for the tree to go in? What does that look like?
No, we recognize that the building isn't very frequented by the public, but we still want some kind of public presence to the front door. So we were just looking at a sidewalk that would connect to the civic campus. And then just the idea that we've got some taller mature trees out of the street, and we're changing the scale and dropping that down, and then rising the scale up again. But the intent is that there's a mass group of planting, probably like in a gravel bed or something, so we can get some more percolation from rainfall. A little bit less cement, concrete.
More of zero scape?
Yeah, exactly.
Nice, good.
And again, like we've been talking about, we're still always providing options. So this is another option that we shared with the group that it's overall massing shape, the roof lines, if you will, of the project are the same. We're just kind of tweaking the materials a little bit. So with this one, there's a little bit less slate on the admin building than the previous one.
So so is that all glass?
Yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of light.
yeah,
Yes.
we're not showing mullions and door frames and stuff right now, but yeah, the idea is that we've got some. We've got some glow sort of in the evening or dusk hours, but then there's also that sort of transparency and being able to see the activity
Nice.
inside the building.
So what's the square footage, bottom level, top level of the middle?
We're at like 3,600 square feet on the first floor. The second floor is a little bit smaller. It's about 3,400 square feet.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
So can we meet our needs?
Yeah, we'll move in and need capacity at the bottom level, at the main level, for sure.
Initially. Nice.
So again, we can start to walk around this project or this option. So on the previous option, if you recall, this is kind of all slate. And we just have the previous option just kind of had a little bit of slate on the shop portion. This one starts to look at creating a slate base bottom, really kind of at that sort of pedestrian human scale, and then using a cost-effective kind of single skin or insulated metal panel above. But by having.
It's really easy to take care of, and you don't have to do anything with it, it's just
Correct.
Yeah.
So you can power wash it all down if you need to.
Nice. Wow.
But by taking a single skin metal product and varying kind of the widths and having a little bit two different kind of tones, you start to add sophistication to a metal panel product that unexpected on kind of this project type.
Yeah, the combination of the wood.
Yeah, we like to use wood to help warm it up, but also in areas where it's not going to necessarily get a lot of sun.
It's not structural.
Yeah,
Just a structural decorative. That's awesome.
And keep walking around.
So as we look at that, where are we planning to like keep all the trucks?
Yeah.
When they're not in use.
Inside.
Just out of curiosity.
Just this guy's
Yeah,
Just
I guess
inside the
If
base.
you can, on your massive study, it shows the,
They show the footprint.
just the footprint.
Yeah.
So there's also that secondary storage shop that's a pre-engineered metal building. That will be phase 2, so that will just be straight truck storage.
Great.
Yeah. Vehicles equipment.
So the neighbors aren't concerned that there'll be a bunch of trucks all over the place, they'll all be covered up in the building, so that's nice, okay.
Need to think about,
We don't have that building.
backup alarm on.
Right now, I have 3 bays that are single bays, there's no whole 2 bays at my shop. So that's 3 times the amount of storage space to get what vehicles we have right now. And again, it just depends on cost wise, how close phase 1 and phase 2 run together. Phase 2 may run pretty close, depending on the money and future development and growth of the city, right? Because we're using a lot of impact fee money to help subsidize and pay for this. And impact fee money comes from building permits and new residents. So that helps, you know, we've done our studies and that's how we've allocated a lot of that money to be spent.
It's exciting, I like that.
So it'll certainly continue to develop. May or may not look exactly like this, you know, come to groundbreaking, but I think our general point is that, you know, we are designing something that is civic of nature and something that everybody can be proud of. That's the word.
So on the north side of that, we're just planning right now until we expand that, possibly just having a grassy area.
So 155 feet is more than a lot in the A1 zone.
Oh,
So
yeah,
it's
it's-
like,
that's
to give you kind of a visual of what distance that would be for the north side, it'd be as if there was a lot of.
It will be maintained, there might be a little section that is road based that we use for the summer. To take the salters off of our trucks and dry storage them. Out there in a raft area, so there is a little bit of. Probably road base that will keep it maintained and the weeds cut down and as good as we can.
Are you planning on some type of a rack to set your standards on?
Right now we have metal software stands that we built. I'm not sure if we're gonna try to do a drive under hookup rack. As many UDOT sheds have. But we do have smaller standards for the most part, so our skid steer can lift them out of the trucks and set them on the softwood racks.
That's sure easy for one operator to just back in there and hook those chains and raise your head and you're out.
Yeah. So that is something that we'll look into in the future. Because we are going with trying to upsize a few of the trucks with wider road widths to have wings and if they don't have a fixed standard bed, then we will want a rack to just back under, hook up and pull out.
Yeah, and that's something like that is typically what we would have in that vehicle and equipment storage shop. So, you know, we can get to that phase 2 sooner than later. Makes it easier for everybody.
So as we look forward to future growth, we're confident that this will meet our needs moving forward.
From the studies we've done, knowing that a lot of undeveloped area is high floodplain area and makes it difficult, we pursue this with the opportunity for expansion at the site to be a 50-year building. You know, the building 50 years, and then if we need to expand onto the site, we have some room for growth.
I think that was something that was pretty eye-opening on some of our facility tours. is that a number of the public works facilities that we toured, they're experiencing that growth, but they didn't have anywhere to grow. So they've had to just grow inside and inside, so everything just became more crowded and more crowded. And so that's why we've kind of had Justin kind of stake some of that land as his for future growth, so that it's not a scenario that a successor would run into in 30, 40 years.
So for growth, we talked about the 155, is that the skinny part of the green or the thick part of the green? The skinny is about 55.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the longer portion,
Or awesome rec centers.
we're like 300.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So again, this is pretty conceptual and preliminary, but we've had a number of meetings pretty much every couple of weeks with the executive committee to get to this point. Everybody seems pretty excited by it. Just you know, managing the dollars, of course. So yeah, we're just gonna continue to push forward unless there's some feedback or some pushback on where we are today.
I like the building with more speed, but I won't have any feedback that will stop you from going forward.
I agree.
But you know, maybe the only thing I would add to it would be a water feature.
We do have the well.
On the other side of the target.
Paint the well cap blue, maybe we can just.
The well is the man
Just
and
put something in, paint the light, the cement light.
Yeah.
Put a T in the well, about 20 feet down and pipe it over to that open space from the building.
we still have plenty of options when we do the irrigation system and the irrigation pond.
Oh, that would be sweet to have
So, but just for this right now, the public works building doesn't have any existing water on it, that would make it usable to be a water feature.
fountain, maybe small thing.
We'll save that for the city hall.
Yeah. it's that.
People are coming.
Oh, there you go. We want these guys to know how important they are too.
And Cottonwoods.
I'm just fun and mean.
I get it.
I love that. That's awesome. Thank you. That's good. I'm privileged to take a look at what you're doing. That's awesome. Thank you.
Well, this probably won't be the last time.
Great.
No,
It's great.
absolutely, yeah.
So you'll see it evolve.
It's great to be a part of this. I really appreciate being a part of this. I love that. I mean, that's something that, you know, people in the community can look at and say,
Yeah,
oh,
it's 3D.
That's not just a-
Great.
yeah.
It'll grow in detail. The next time you see it, you know, window mullions and structural elements and walls inside.
Well, we love our city. We want it to look good.
Yeah. And it's been a resounding message from the group for sure.
You love it, sure. Thank you. We want to take pride in our, what it looks like, and
You should.
yes.
So we've got a little subtle Ben Lomond reference and the massing of the building.
Just looking at it from west to east there, if you're
Yeah.
driving down
Yeah.
that field. Yeah, I like that.
You want to do aesthetic features, they should match the mountain ranges behind it.
Very nice. Very
Thank
nice.
you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Tim.
So just next steps on the project. Once we finalize a few more things, we've been in this conceptual timeline, but as you're already aware, a conditional use permit is required for the building. We'll be bringing that to you as we nail down the specifics of the impacts, and you can look to that coming in the next month or two with the final site plan after that, so that we know we've met the requirements for the conditional use.
And then assuming that things progress as we would like them to, building formally could start
Yeah, we're thinking of breaking ground in May, June of this year. We know that we need to be out and into this building by January 2025, right? So we're trying to have enough cushion with a construction window of about 13 or 14 months.
When we nail down a more certain date, we're gonna probably do a city council planning commission event with a full groundbreaking.
Yeah. Sweet.
I'll get you some shovels, paint and gold.
That's great. Love that. Yeah, okay, that'd be cool. Right on.
Yeah, so we are certainly around. We're here frequently on a regular basis and we'll be in front of you guys again, but Jenny and Justin, they know how to get a hold of us, Matt, the mayor. So if anything comes up, I guess we'll probably hear from Jenny.
Thanks for hopping in, Matt.
Yep, sorry I couldn't be there in person, but you're in the very capable hands of Kevin and Dugan, so. It's exciting. We're excited for it.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
We can adjourn the work session and then we'll convene as the planning commission at 7.
Exactly. Okay, well, if there's no other questions or anything, let's formally adjourn our work session. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, nice.
Do we need to stay with you? Keep this.
Yeah, if you have time, 45 minutes or so, till we open our meeting. I'll just pause ours.
Okay, all right, Jen.
You'll have to literally take them with you up into the.
I noticed that.
Begin our commission meeting. If there are discussions that need to take place, if you want to go out of the room so we can, that would be super, thank you. Okay, so let's formally start our meeting and call to order, and we want to excuse 2 of our commissioners, Brad Elmer and Brendan Nilsson, who won't be here tonight. We're always glad when we can have a full quorum. Okay, let's move on to agenda number 2 item. Did you all get a chance to review our meeting minutes from our last
Came
one?
condensed the second time. So,
Way to be thorough, Nathan.
well, I reviewed stuff when I did it, and I got the extended version the first time. So.
That's awesome. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve minutes. No questions or concerns, modifications that we need to make, okay?
I'll make that motion to approve our minutes for October 12th,
Or November
2022.
November 9th. Right?
Yeah, this is November
Oh,
9th.
To October 12th on
uh-oh. Yes, November 9th.
of November 9th, 2022.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Very good. All right, and I neglected to welcome the mayor again, and then everyone else that's here. Thank you for being here, and those that are online. We appreciate your interest in our meeting and in the city. Okay, let's move on then to agenda item number 3. And this is our chance every year to elect a chair and a vice chair of our committee. I've had the privilege of being the chair for the last few years, which it's been a great privilege to do that. And but it's nice to have some new blood and some new options, and so let's do that. I think we could just put forward names of any of the committee that would like to. You can nominate yourself, or you can nominate somebody else if you'd like to do that. I'll take some.
I'll nominate myself, but I don't know if I'm going for vice chair or chairman.
Nathan, right on.
For one of those.
I'd like to nominate Chad to stay in the chairman job.
Very kind, thank you.
He does such a great job.
Thank you, I appreciate that. It's fun. It's a good opportunity.
Well, I'll
What about
throw
you,
my
Kevin?
hat in too. I'll nominate myself as well, for sure.
Right on.
This should be interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And Nathan for vice. Or chair.
I'll go for vice chair since both of you are nominated for chairman. That will simplify things a little.
Vice. Okay. Gosh, it's too bad those other guys aren't
We can nominate.
here. Yes, we could. They're not here. We can nominate. That's for sure. Okay. I mean, I'll throw my hat in for myself, I guess, as chair too. So there's 2 votes. I'm also, I could get behind you too, Kevin, or you, Nate. Either of you guys would do
Well,
good.
you've done such a great job too, so that's awesome.
Nice. It's just fun. It's just fun. It's easy when you work with good people.
He's Brenda the vice then.
She is right now, yeah.
I don't think she would mind not being the vice, though, honestly.
Let's see the firm minutes.
Well, how do we do this voting?
Well, okay, we've thrown it out. So Kevin for chair, Chad for chair, Nathan for vice. Yeah, there's just the 4 of us. Could we put it off till next month?
Would you like to postpone until February?
Yeah,
Do you want
I
to
just-
table
Let's
it
do it.
Till February and see if you have the other members here? Is that the intent?
Yeah, well, that was my thought. That if we had everybody.
There we go, 2 more.
What do you guys think? Should we do it now or should we postpone
I
it?
think
and
we
do it in
should
a
do
month?
it now. Let's get it over
Okay.
with.
Just go get it done.
Okay.
How you wanna do it?
Okay, I'm.
Don't put yourself behind.
No, for yourself.
You.
Okay, all right, how about if we just have a vote? Let's just call names and you just vote for, just raise your hand in favor of. Okay, let's go Nathan for vice. You, vice chair? Okay,
Can
right
you
on.
do that verbally, please?
What's that?
Can you have a verbal vote for the record? A verbal vote for the record?
A verbal vote.
Yeah.
I vote for Nathan for vice chair.
Or, yes.
Okay, so we've got 4 votes for Nathan for
Okay.
vice chair.
Thank you.
Okay, Kevin for chair,
I vote for Kevin for
Okay.
chair.
2 and 2.
Yeah,
Are you-
I would vote for Kevin for chair.
Okay, you would? Okay,
Mhm.
let's let Kevin be chair then,
Alright,
and Nathan could be vice.
All right.
congratulations.
Are you sure? You sure? Because you said Chad originally. Just want to solid up.
I just nominate him.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. I'm not going to question
Support
you.
you.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
As
Okay.
long as it's not me.
You didn't get nominated.
I know.
If you wanted to. Okay, so, all in favor of Kevin?
I'm in
Aye.
favor of that.
Totally good. Yeah, and Nathan vice? Right on.
All right.
Okay, so beginning, that's great.
Next meeting, you're
Yeah.
in charge.
All right.
Congratulations.
Get the center
buddy.
seat with the hat.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. We gotta share the wealth. Blessings, man. Okay. All right, very good. So we selected 2 good people for our committee moving forward, which is fantastic. Okay. And let's move on then with agenda item number 4, which is our public hearing. So we're gonna hold a public hearing for or against Harrisville Ordinance 539, which is a general plan amendment, amending the moderate income housing element of the general plan, including the 2022 moderate income housing report, The changes will have citywide applicability. Okay. Do we have anybody from this city that wants to make any, would you like to make some comments?
It's up to you. I'd be happy to review the memo that was in the packet.
Did you guys all get a chance to review the memo? I think that's fine. Are there any other comments that you think are relevant that we ought
Let's
to?
have an introduction for the public with the memo too, though.
That's a good idea.
So that way,
That's a good idea.
before the hearing, they know when
Yeah,
we're starting.
would you do that, Jenny? That would be fantastic.
Memo in the packet.
Yeah, it was. Right before they opened it.
I just opened the packet.
Oh, I forgot to do all of the keynotes.
That's okay.
No worries.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. We'll go ahead and review the staff memo, just for a little history here. The summary is on November 18th of 2022, the Harrisville Mayor and City Council received a notice of non-compliance for the 2022 Moderate Income Housing Report, which outlined deficiencies in our report and issued a 90-day grace period for compliance. The majority of cities required to file this report were issued notices of non-compliance due to new legislation passed in 2020, which increased the requirements for the reporting. During the 2019 legislative session, SB 34 was adopted and subsequently enacted, which required cities with populations over 5,000 to provide an annual moderate income housing report to the state beginning December of 2020. Part of the requirements included adopting several moderate income housing strategies, which the state code outlined, and reporting which strategies the city had identified, and additional requirements were adopted during the 2022 legislative session with House Bill 462, which includes amendments to the city's general plan, and not only requiring the strategies to be identified, but also put into an implementation plan for action for each strategy. So many cities' reports, including Harrisville's, was deficient in updating the general plan strategies element of the requirement, and our moderate income housing plan failed to have a implementation plan to accompany the report. So the proposed ordinance, the general plan, Ordinance 539 with the general plan amendments, it amends the general plan to include the updated new strategies that the state legislators adopted last year during their session. And the accompanying Exhibit A is the 2022 Moderate Income Housing Report. And it identifies 6 strategies that are being recommended by staff for the general plan to include, with implementation steps and benchmark timeline, just ideas that staff has put together to prepare for you. And that was all included in the packet. Some of the strategies outline more aggressive timelines for completion, and some, but we do have a 5-year period to complete these strategies. And so those timelines can be modified if you feel like we've been too strict, or you want to give more time, or you want something to move more quickly. Also, as part of this, we are updating our transportation map. Since we have to hold a public hearing to do any general plan amendments, we opted to include this transportation map because we've made some street classification changes, modifications. We've also outlined new development roads that we know are going to be coming into the city. We've identified an area on the Wasatch Front Regional Council that needs to be considered on our transportation map, and we can go over that in a little bit more detail as well. And it will outline some of the areas in the city that we can consider to meet our moderate income housing strategies. And so that will help us with our discussion after the public hearing.
Nice. Sounds great. Yeah, I appreciated that you included the map with that. That was great. For the visually. Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Let's go ahead and formally open up the public hearing. For those of you that would like to make any comments, if you'll step forward and just let us know what your name is and where you live, and then give you about 30 minutes or so to share with us your opinions. Let's go ahead and formally open that up now.
So Greg Montgomery, 231 Larson Lane. So commenting on the plan amendment, I know this always puts, the legislature puts cities, especially smaller cities, in a very difficult position. I notice there's some language in there about things that will never happen in Harrisville with adding. And I just wonder about the idea of saying, okay, there's a certain amount the state says you need to have, but for like transit stations and that, Harrisville's not gonna have any transit stations. They just won't happen. We just don't have the population to create a station, so why put that as an element in the plan? Some of the other items, of course, are very difficult. I know the legislature wants to have certain things happen, but they don't happen unless there's money to make it happen.
Right.
You can change all the ordinances you want to and add these things, but the bottom line is to make something affordable. Someone's got to subsidize it. And waiving fees, doing this or that is a token, but it doesn't do anything to create affordable housing. Because until someone's going to subsidize part of that building construction cost, it's still not going to be affordable unless you're doing it yourself, which is, how we've of course done our housing. So I just, as you go about that, I think take a look at some of the things that are there and saying, okay, are they really realistic for Harrisville? Because the state says, I think, is it, Jenny, I don't know if it's 5 or 6 that you need to have now out of the list of 20 some odd that they have. And
Do you want me to respond to
Yeah,
your
would
comments?
you?
I mean, that's just one thing, just to take a look and consider which ones really are Harrisville type situations that can address that versus here's the state list and we're just gonna do it. The other thing I had, I did not notice the street classification map. I don't know if that's possible to view as you look at this, or is that a separate part of the hearing? Is that all considered with the moderate income housing?
Can we put that up on the screen? Yeah, it's just, it was included as part of our packet today, which is great. So it looks like Highway 89 is a major corridor.
Person lanes and minority.
And then we've got lots of collector.
So as far as what's new from existing street map, could you identify what's new from existing?
Yes, all of the blue dotted lines in Ben Lomond Golf Course, Copperwoods development, the Dixon Creek development on Washington Boulevard, the proposed Harrisville Fields.
So the dotted lines are
Dotted
new additions.
lines are all local roads that will be coming in with new development. The classification or reclassification of 750 West from a local road to a collector is identified by a dashed yellow line. There is also a yellow dashed line on North Street because the Wasatch Front Regional Council identifies that as being a through connection to 400 North going westward. And we have also updated existing private roads that were not included on the previous map. Those are all outlined in Golf Crest Golf View, which is across the street from Orion Junior High. We had them do an evaluation of the whole city to pretty much mark up things that weren't necessarily included on the last map. Is that helpful?
Yes, okay. So I guess the one comment I have on this is the potential future road going off Larson Lane heading to Washington Boulevard. Again, I know the reason why it's shown there is to encourage people to develop there, But until you address how do you sewer that property, you'll never have development happen there.
You're talking about off Larson Lane?
Yeah, if you look right here, this proposal here,
Oh,
with an additional road here, your intersection is gonna be too close for UDOT to say yes, would allow you to do that. But, you know, and the other part, I just question, the road layout versus what can really take place on that piece of property. If you, look at that, I just have a concern about that being shown there.
Okay, so in general, your perspective is that we ought to take a look at this again and.
I think you ought to look at the road map and say, okay, it's easy to put a line there, but can you really develop it there? Your future plan should say, yes, this can really happen. And I think there's some questions there in that indication of what could happen. Of course, the others I know, in these areas you're looking at what may happen if a property owner sells to try to make that work. But again, I'll try to see them line up intersections so they're oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't touch that.
Yeah, it's very sensitive.
Yeah, it is very sensitive.
Okay, great.
And then the other question would be, again, for wetlands in that here, how can those road connections take place in that area?
Yeah, great, thank you for, I appreciate that, that's good perspective.
I have some concerns. I'm Shanna Edwards, 1068 North Harrisville Road, about the modern income housing plan. And it's interesting that they assume, you know, the report that's figured, they assume based on income, when the income hasn't changed, it's the housing market that's changed. At one time, we had a great percentage of homes in Harrisville that fell, even single-family homes that fell into that category. And just because the inflation has brought that, then they're saying we don't have the percentage that we need. That's one of my concerns, because the increase in home value has impacted the classification of moderate income housing. And it doesn't reflect the actual income anyway. The development applications in recent years continue to be focused toward the multiple family, high density and all this kind of stuff. I guess they disguise that as being moderate income housing, but actually the price of renting those is usually very high unless they're subsidized. So I have a question about, does the report that the city received for 2022 moderate housing income take into consideration the developments that are already approved but are not yet completed, which fall into what they suggest would be a modern income housing development, like the golf course and other multiple housing developments that are already approved? Or was this report taken from the property taxes on what is already on the ground in 2022 with the inflated real estate prices? I looked at the goals and the ones the city had thought they might take a look at. And I really feel like goal number 1, we already have zones and zoning regulations that allow for the production of moderate income housing. There's a substantial amount of commercial and mixed uses which can accommodate that kind of high development. And the goal number 2 talks about the expansion of infrastructure to accommodate. And I think it's important to look at that before we start looking at, you know, putting in more high density development. We need to be ahead of the game. Be careful not to allow development and then try to fix the infrastructure. And I think goal number 3 talks about allowing for internal or detached accessory dwelling in residential zones. And I'm aware that this is already happening. It is in my area. There's already, you know, homes that have been turned into duplexes, and they aren't being regulated. So if it was carefully worded, maybe so that something like that could be allowed, so that it still looks like a residential area, but has some kind of control, regulations to control and can ensure that the property is kept up, and also that there's adequate parking. And then I think it would be important to not have more than 2 units. You want it to still look like a residential. You know, maybe if there's a little mother-in-law home to the side or something, but those kind of things would need regulation. It's going on right now, but it's not being regulated. Goal number 4, was to rezone for higher density. And with what's already proposed, I don't think we need to rezone any more property for that kind of development. After all, our neighbors have been kind enough to put all their high density on our borders, Ogden and Ogden City, North Ogden, Pleasant View. They've incorporated all their what's considered high density development on our borders. So, I think we need to be careful. Goal number 5 is the landlord incentive program, which I think is really, really good. And referring back to goal number 3, where it's, having homes turning into more than one unit. I think that it has been a person, I think the state allowed this to happen if the property owner was living in the house in one of the units. But I think if they turn these into rental units where they don't live there, then there should be some kind of there's a business in that case. And so they should have to get a license or something so that there can be some control there. And goal number 6 was to partner with another entity or government involved with incentives to add more of moderate income housing. And the reason Harrisville incorporated in the first place was to be able to control development of our city rather than be controlled by the county. And we really don't want to change Harrisville in order to take advantage of incentives. I think incentives are not worth changing the city for the city-wide development that does not fit our lifestyle, but increases the need for more infrastructure, police, safety, and all that kind of thing. And I think that 90-day window is for having those goals in is kind of a short window. But even if they have 5 years if you look 5 years ahead, then all of these other developments that are already planned to be developed will change what we're looking at as far as moderate income housing. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. Any other comments? Okay. I'm gonna move to close then our public hearing, the comment portion of our public hearing. I had a similar thought to Greg about what the city could realistically do. Is the city of the firm opinion that everything that is written in this new report is something that we want to do and something that we need to do?
We just picked a few of them. We didn't take the transit corridors because we don't have a spot for that.
I'd be happy to give some clarification on why they're listed specifically the way they are in the plan, and maybe that will help you understand a little bit more. So I do agree with Mr. Montgomery as far as the state challenges small cities with their legislation, and I would encourage people to be more involved with what the state legislators are doing in who they elect to those positions. But we have had a number of meetings over the course of the last 3 months with the state, specifically the Department of Workforce Services that oversees moderate income housing reports and reports back to the legislators. And they were very, very specific on what we have to include on our general plan to be in compliance. If we do not include the exact language that is on the state code, we are not compliant. So that is why you see the strategies exactly identified the way that the state strategies are. That does not mean that we have to create a major transit hub. We know we are not going to have a major transit hub because They're going to be putting one in Ogden, right around 2nd Street, and they already have one in Pleasant View. And we know there won't be another one in Harrisville. So, but we adopted or considered proposing consideration for that because we do have commercial hubs. We do have other things on those strategies that we can identify. So the strategy doesn't, all of the elements of that strategy are not having to be met if you can't meet them, but the language has to be exact. The penalty for us not having exact language is actually our Class C road funds, which is a lot of money that comes to the city. And so we don't want to take any risk on not being in compliance with the state. 66 out of 80 cities were non-compliant. We know the problem isn't with the cities. The city is not creating a situation where we're not monitoring our moderate income housing. But our hands are tied in what we have to do to come to compliance. We would love to have more than 90 days to work through this process. If we don't meet the 90-day window, and we have to meet the public hearing code and the recommendation from Planning Commission to go to City Council, if you table this tonight, we will have to call a special meeting to meet the deadline for the 90 days. The implementation of the plans can take up to 5 years. There's not a rush to implement them. We have 5 years to implement them. We don't have 5 years to adopt them. We have less than 90 days. At this point, we have about 30 days left to adopt them. So those are important notes that staff was up against to meet the deadlines that were imposed on us that we didn't have. So the strategies we've identified absolutely can be changed. But the way that we looked at it, viewed it, were exactly what has been said in public comments. What is the city already doing? Right. What are we doing? Because we asked, the first question we asked in our meeting was, how can we get credit for what we've already done? We adopted a mixed use ordinance years ago. We've been implementing it over years. How do we get credit for it? We can't. We can't get credit for what we've already done. Another city went to argue with the Department of Workforce Services over their compliance, already compliant with it. And they had to modify to include implementation and other plans, but we are not getting credit or recognized for the efforts that we've already put forward. So recognize that the strategies that we're adopting, we feel like we have a handle on already and can meet, because starting in 2023, which is this year, our new report that's due next year has to mark action that we've taken on these plans. If we're already doing something in that direction, it will be a whole lot easier for the city to stay in compliance than to adopt a strategy that we don't have any plan of action for. So the 6 strategies that are presented tonight are things that staff feels like we can get behind. What that looks like, we don't know. Ultimately. It doesn't mean that we have to allow mixed use all over Harrisville. It doesn't mean that we have to allow multifamily housing. The second question I asked them was, when is the state going to redefine moderate income housing? In 2018, we had a number of homes that were compliant, and the majority of our homes were compliant years before that. But since the inflation has taken place and the wages have not kept up, we don't determine our median income. We don't determine the housing costs. We're not setting the value on properties, but we're faced with having to meet a demand that's being placed on the city at the risk of losing some of the only funding mechanisms we have in place to maintain our city. So this is a severe issue. This is a very huge issue for the cities to be addressing. And we don't have resources like large cities have. Some cities spent 18 months preparing for these moderate income housing reports to be told they're non-compliant. Cities hired consultants to make sure they were compliant. and got notices of non-compliance. We anticipate there's going to be legislative change to this bill. We anticipate that new legislation will be proposed, but we do not have any options at this time. We have to do something, and these are things the city felt like we could, or staff felt like we could implement, or we could measure it. Maybe we don't allow new zones to be rezoned, but we evaluate the development proposals that come in, and we take a benchmark. Well, and this parcel of property was for sale for 6 months, and we received 10 multifamily applications for this, or proposals for this. I mean, obviously applications would look different, but we've tried to identify areas that we feel like we could allow around our commercial corridor or other locations that could do it. We don't control the definition of moderate income housing. We don't control wages, and we don't control the housing market, yet we're being tasked with solving a problem that's very difficult.
A burden that's being placed
Yes.
on smaller cities like us, right?
Yes, absolutely. So there was one other.
Thank you, I appreciate that explanation.
So I just had one, if you don't
No,
mind,
no,
I
please
just,
go ahead.
the development plan is focused on townhouses and multifamily in certain areas, because that is all they're considering,
As moderate.
moderate income housing.
Right.
One thing that we have become aware of is senior housing is often automatically considered moderate income housing, and we do not have any ordinances in place or anything that identifies a senior overlay in our ordinance. So when we talked about overlay maps, it's not just the mixed use. We were trying to identify, we've been, in the last 3 or 4 months, we've been contacted by developers that want to go that direction. And we actually received an application that was pulled by the property owner for an area to potentially have a senior development. So when we talk about overlay maps, we don't necessarily need just the one we have, but considering other overlay options that the city could focus on. We have been told through different meetings on moderate income housing that the state's likely to consider detached accessory dwellings as mandatory. It was in 2020, the fall of 2020, when the legislation mandated that we have to allow internal accessory dwelling units. We did adopt an ordinance that allows for internal dwelling units. We anticipate that they will adopt, the legislators will also require us to do it. So we're trying to get out ahead of it. But the Good Landlord program is absolutely related to monitoring these. We have a Good Landlord program in place. We've not had enough staff or the staff support necessary to run the program, which requires them to have business licenses if they have rental units. We have a new business license official. She has been running the business license. It's very different this year. If anybody has a business or a home occupation in the city, they received new information this year as we increase our monitoring on our business licenses. But these are all steps. I guess my point with this long-winded explanation for public comments is that these are all things the city feels like we have an opportunity to capture. And you're welcome to change that. You're welcome to identify any other strategy that you feel like is beneficial to the city. But these are ones we thought we could actually do. And to respond to the comment, the state requires we adopt 3. That's mandatory. We've given you 6. And if we adopt 5, we qualify for special funding that opportunities through the state. So it's highly encouraged to adopt 5, mandatory to adopt 3. We've given you 6 strategies, and frankly, that's because there's just not been enough time for me to spend more time identifying more programs the city may already have in place that we can utilize. So I leave that up to your discussion.
Yeah, no, thank you, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Justin, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, as Jenny alluded, the state has come back with the fact that they can hold up Class B and C road funds and transportation tax funds which is $500,000 of revenue for the year for the city. That's what pays to plow our streets, that's what pays my guy for the salt, for the overtime, that pays for street signage, sidewalk repairs, road repairs. It really would be very detrimental to the city if we don't get ahead of this. And very much so, Jennie has worked tirelessly to get ahead of this and get this to you guys so that we can do what's best for the city. And this is by far what we see the staff as best for the city.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it. So these areas, these 6 areas that we've talked about are general enough that it doesn't bind us in any particular way, where we can further clarify within those areas objectives, specific ways to accomplish that, which further commits us and narrows what we're talking about. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, so you'll see in the spreadsheet that was included in the plan, we've identified the strategy that the state has adopted, and that can't be changed. So you'll see the amendment to the general plan, the reason it's verbatim is because it's required to be verbatim, and that word was used in the discussion. So verbatim language in the general plan, and then we've identified what our strategy or objective is, and our goal in the next column. So we're trying to address the loss of moderate income housing and looking at creative additional zoning options, the senior one being an example of one.
The accessory dwelling.
How are we gonna, so the next column is, what is our plan? How are we gonna implement this? Well, we are gonna start collecting data through our development applications or proposals through our project management meeting. We're going to look at code complaints that come in for people who are renting or having, these benchmarks, mind you, might take time. This isn't something we can capture in a month or two, it's over the course of time. We're gonna look at code complaints that may come in. We're gonna look at parking enforcement through our police department, where are these higher density areas causing a public safety hazard on our public roadways? And any other resource that staff can identify as a measuring
The
gauge.
more data we've got moving
Yes.
forward, the better, yes.
And then we will come to you as staff with overlay maps for the identified areas that we've found that we feel are potential areas for senior developments. And we will use a moderate income housing checklist when we have early development discussions at project management to see. We are implementing that in our language at that meeting to see if developers are willing to help the city meet those moderate income housing requirements. And then we will identify the timeline. So we're gonna collect some of this data. We can extend that timeline. We put it in through the year of 2023 because we are also going to be keeping track of our building permits that are taken out for any internal dwelling accessory unit or multifamily. And then we figured we could draft some language in early 2024, still continue to collect the data throughout that year. By the end of 2024, we would have 2 years of data to base adopting a new ordinance or overlay map or amendment with. So that's the first strategy kind of spelled out. And I'm happy to go through all of them if you prefer.
I read, are you guys all comfortable with how you read it and understand it? No, I appreciate that, thank you, that was, that helped me understand it better.
I think most of these we're just monitoring through 2023 and collecting data on so that we can then act on it later. So that makes it fairly straightforward for this
And
year.
that's smart. That's smart, gives us some data to work with.
Plus, like Jenny said, a lot of these things we're already working on. So as we build out the golf course or that goes through, that will count because that's happening post-plan as the other developments come in on our proposed streets.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
this one and all the townhomes to be built in here will count towards something.
But wasn't there gonna be an over 55 at the Ben moment too, which would help that?
That section of it, if we put an overlay in for it, that would help.
I'd just like to touch on the last strategy, O,
Yeah, that one is a little-
where it maintains community partnerships with some of the local coordination. There are opportunities that the city is unaware of, and the mayor and I in the last recent months have met with the Economic and Community Development Director, and they will be participating in our retreat on the 24th, which we'll get to later in follow up, but there are programs available for property owners or homeowners or potential homeowners that are in place that the city is not having to waive impact fees, or we're not having to waive building fees. But we need to start conversations with the entities or the partners to become aware of them. And the Economic Development Director and Community Development Director, and also the Center of Excellence Director for the county, they know of those resources. They know what programs are available. And I've also been, approached by neighboring cities who are in similar circumstances with their public safety, where they can't afford to live in, their police officers can't afford to live in their own cities because they're the same issues that we're facing. They can't get the wage up high enough, and they don't necessarily want to live in the community they work in. And so there are other cities that would like to partner with each other. I'm just leaving that door open. I'm not saying that we would have to do something like that, but that's an example of partnering with a different entity or a different community partner to make opportunities for moderate income housing come to fruition without it costing the city money through waiving fees. But again, we can't change the language of what the strategy is.
Getting pretty heavy-handed on the state level. Do any of you have any questions or concerns that you'd like to bring up? I think that kind of solidified in my mind.
Detached accessory dwellings are a question. Do those have to be fixed buildings? Like if
So-
someone's gonna have a campground in their backyard, do we have to start?
Yes, they would have to be a detached accessory built dwelling would have to meet the same regulations
Okay.
as a single family home as far as sewer, water connection, all of those things. What that looks like, I don't know that the state, again, sometimes they pass legislation and don't understand the unintended consequences.
Right.
I haven't had an opportunity to visit with our building inspector yet, but is there an issue with having 2 power meters on a house? Are there issues with multiple connections? These are things that have to be considered.
If you have a tiny home community that Salt Lake's planning for its avenues area, that could be an issue.
Yes, and absolutely.
Oh.
And another thing too, that I asked, that's very important to consider, I asked if we cannot complete one of our strategies, can we identify a new strategy? And she said, absolutely, we have to include in our report the barriers. So for example, we find ourselves 3 years down the line, we can't do the detached accessory dwelling units because we can't meet the regulations through Rocky Mountain Power, we can't facilitate enough storm water, or we cannot have enough sewer lateral connections on our main lines. Any of those barriers we would identify in our report, and then we'd say, eventually we would abandon that strategy and we would adopt another one. So just because we adopt a series of strategies tonight, or the city council ultimately, doesn't mean that that's the strategy the city's going to be implementing. Because we may have barriers that we can't push through.
Yeah, no, great, thank you, I appreciate it.
I'll start a tiny home forest when I go through.
Oh, because I grew up on the Evans, I have no idea where they're going with the tiny homes.
Oh, they've got a parcel that they're looking at housing homeless people in tiny homes. They've been planning it for a while, and it's been going on and on.
Yeah, unless they're gonna tear down some houses, there's no room on the avenues to do that. Okay.
They're looking at it, and it would
That's
be
interesting.
an issue. A lot of the residents there are upset about it too,
Oh,
because
yeah.
those things can increase density
My
like
family
crazy.
lives on the avenues there.
Okay.
So, anyway,
Okay,
I'm good with these. They're
Okay.
mostly data
Bill,
collections
you okay?
there, so.
Kevin, you're okay? I think this is good. I will entertain a motion to approve because I think this is, given the research that's gone into this, given the wisdom and understanding of
So you'll recommend adoption?
of the city, yes,
And I'll
recommend
make that
adoption.
motion. You okay with that? I'll make a
Yes,
motion
please.
to recommend adoption of Harrisville Ordinance 539, General Plan Amendment, amending the moderate income housing elements of the general plan, including the moderate income housing report. Do I need to mention the traffic, the street plan?
Including exhibits.
And including the exhibits.
Very nice. Okay, second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. I thank you. I think your description helped seal the deal for me. Okay. Let's move on then to agenda item number 6.
Six before 5.
What's that?
It's a different thing. It's just open public comments.
And anything that the city wants to say before I open it up? Okay, all right, let's go ahead and open up formally our public comment period, and if anybody would like to make comments, please try to limit your comments to around 3 minutes or so. We'll do that formally now.
Greg Montgomery, 231 Larson Lane. And just a couple comments for your consideration as you move forward with the 750 project. As I heard the architect talk about things, he said a lot of words, but then he didn't back up the words of how they got into his study. For example, the architectural characteristics of Harrisville. All I saw was a building that is very modern, and that is done all over the place with the, let's mimic the mountains, let's do a 2-layer, this middle and this middle. And I didn't see any analysis of what is the Harrisville's character to say this is how we're meeting that. The other thing I didn't see is analysis of, they did great on-site, but how does it relate to the properties around that to make sure it is compatible, which is one of your requirements as a conditional use permit. They really didn't address how is this impacting or mitigating impacts to the people to the west, to the south, and even to the north, even though the distance was talked about. As the discussion went further along, it's talked about, well, we're going to actually put some racks out here and do this as some road base, which isn't even on the drawings, but if that is the intent, show it, so you can make an analysis of what impacts does this do to the neighbors that need to be mitigated. So I think in the analysis, they really need to take a look at some of those things, because again, this property is zoned 01, and the assumption is from the neighbors is that this is more of a park space, not more of an industrial space right on the street. So we'll put some buffering around it, that it's minimal. You know, we'll put some trees there, have it flat, you'll see through the trees, and but we've met, but you really haven't addressed what are the side issues. So while they did a great job on the circulation, on the building usage, building design of that, I think those are some things that are still lacking as you get to the point of doing the conditional use review, that they just haven't addressed. How do you mitigate certain impacts of lights from trucks? I know you don't go snow plowing, you wait till 8 in the morning to go take a snow plow out, so there'll never be any truck lights going into the neighbors, you know, as you pull through those things. So they need to address some of those impacts, and I didn't see that in their site analysis. So just a thinker thought.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. All righty, let's close the public comment period formally. And appreciate your perspective and interest. Let's move on to agenda item number 7, which is any staff follow-up.
So the only staff follow-up I have for you, since we had our presentation about the 750 West, I don't have a follow-up on that tonight. Just a reminder of the retreat on January 24th. It will actually begin at 5:30 at the Harrisville Cabin.
PM.
It will be.
What day is that?
It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday.
The 24th of January at 5:30 PM at the cabin, and come prepared to interact about our economic and community development. The Weaver County will be there to help us assess some of the resources that are available. And also we'll be doing goal setting and aligning that with our capital improvement plan for the future, because we'd like to get out ahead, staff would like to get out ahead of identifying issues
I love getting out ahead of things.
before they come in front of us. And then the city council will be discussing the fiscal 2024 budget, and department heads have been busy preparing that for them.
January 24th at 5:30.
For the beginning stages of the budget discussion.
Thank you for inviting us to that.
Absolutely,
I appreciate
we look
that.
forward to
That's
your
awesome.
input in that discussion.
Love that.
So how did city council go last night with respect to the golf course?
Yes, thank you for asking. So the city council did grant final approval of the Ben Lomond Views Phase 2A
Okay.
subdivision. The follow-up with that, it's contingent or subject to the city engineer's memo and also the staff memo. So the staff met with the developer back in July or August with UDOT to discuss the relocation of the signal. They're requiring an amendment to the Harrisville 2006 corridor agreement with UDOT to relocate that signal, because it's in that agreement at 1550 North, which is Hunting Creek.
Right.
And we want to relocate that to 1900 North with this subdivision. And how that relates to their approval is staff does not want to rush the process of renegotiating or amending that corridor agreement, because it's much broader than one signal at Ben Lomond development. It includes all access to state roads in Harrisville. So it's Wall Avenue, Washington Boulevard, Highway 89.
Wow.
So what we're allowing them to do, because they have indicated on good faith through emails, UDOT has said once that amendment takes place, their permit will be issued. And so we are identifying the city engineer. We've called a meeting, we've met with North Ogden, Pleasant View, and Far West, who are also partners on that same corridor agreement, to identify areas that future growth and development may come into our areas, but also coordinate with each other. We've had some concern with independent meetings that UDOT has held with the cities without the corresponding cities that have an impact on that, including Ogden City and North Ogden City. So we've opened conversations with all of those cities to get on the same page, and anticipating and identifying how we are impacting each other, so that there's not necessarily a benefit to one city over another, and to also continue the traffic and the safety measures that UDOT prioritizes. So that process, so the approval is contingent on that permit. If they can't obtain that permit, they can't move forward on their project. And then they did grant preliminary approval of Phase 2D, which is the northeast section of the development.
Okay.
But that'll come back before for final, this body before final.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand what we're talking about in terms of the light thing. So,
Yes.
so what's
Is
the,
it helpful if I show it on the map?
yeah,
We
what's,
have an agreement with UDOT that says we're gonna have a light on Hunting Creek,
right, and that's been in that agreement for a long period of time.
and we have to change
But
that.
we don't want to change it because
do.
then, okay,
We do, but
Okay.
We're in favor of it being relocated.
okay.
It was in the original corridor agreement, it's here on 1550.
Right.
And it benefits both the golf course development, but also the future connection that the city would need from the
For the city
potential
hall, it says.
move of the city hall
Both ways.
to that location. So we are in favor of that relocation. What UDOT required was a complete study of the 1550 intersection to be conducted to identify how it would impact the traffic that is exiting from that and whether it would be a detriment for us to move it north. And that study came back in favor of the relocation of the signal. We also identified that there's no westerly connection for future connectivity
Right.
of 1550 north to the west, where there is on the 1900 north location. So it's not that we're not in favor of that, it's that the amendment to the corridor agreement, or it looks like it's gonna turn into a renegotiation of the corridor agreement. And that's bigger
Just
than,
open up a can of worms is what we're talking about.
yes, we did.
Okay, so if we choose to do that, then we, of necessity, will have to bring in North Ogden and
Yeah.
Pleasant View and,
Far west.
okay, and so our concern about doing that is,
That they are, there's not a concern with bringing them in. If it were just to be an amendment to that corridor agreement, they would also, all their cities would have to sign off on the amendment because we're all on the same corridor agreement.
gotcha.
But what it's triggered is Pleasant View has identified some areas of concern. North Ogden has had an amendment to that corridor agreement. Far West has had an amendment to the agreement. And we met with Ogden City, who are, we've actually had it on our previous transportation plan, and we've left it on this, identifying a light at 1100 North that UDOT had originally told us wasn't necessarily going to go in there, but we've identified it in to help Ogden identify that road as 1100 North going through, because they built that road to be a collector.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying. So
Yeah. So
by
these are all-
opening this up, all of what has been done in North Ogden and Pleasant View would have to be assumed in this new agreement, plus whatever else their concerns are. So this could potentially take more time than we would like it to be. Okay, thank you.
We didn't
for-
want to hold up the Ben Lomond
Yes.
developer from being able to do some preliminary work on the project and to continue with their agreements that they have with contractors and things by us not giving the final approval while we negotiate the update.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, any timeframe, Jenny?
I wish I had one. We've met with the local cities in December. UDOT identified the first week of January as a meeting point, but we have, obviously that's come and gone. We, as the 4 cities, met with all of our engineers. We held a meeting here in Harrisville, had all of our engineers identify on maps of where we anticipate the future connections to be. The corridor agreement was so strict, and we have lost a lot of potential developments due to the corridor agreement, where they could not get access to the highway and they had to abandon their projects. We've most recently lost a car wash down by Walmart that was trying, because they couldn't get access. So we're trying to align existing intersections that we know and include them on the corridor agreement in the future, so that they aren't shutting us down when we have a proposed development on a larger parcel of property, because we haven't identified it in the corridor agreement as potential access. We literally have had to do a review of the entire city
Thank you.
to move forward on that.
I appreciate that explanation.
Sure.
Is that corridor agreement gonna take away the not truck route sign on Hunting Creek?
No, it shouldn't affect any signage there.
I'm just wondering if we turn that into a full collector and at some point we're going to get a light, we might wanna let trucks on it.
Right.
So, okay. Just Alright,
Right on.
that's a big project.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of big projects lately.
Yes, we have. Holy mackerel. See, now we know why you earn the big bucks. Oh, heavens, but Okay, any other questions or comments or concerns or anything? Okay, let's go ahead and formally adjourn our meeting for tonight. Thank you. Gosh, that's been really informative.